Clap along if you feel like happiness is.
I feel a little bit happier. How does everybody feel?
Delighted.
I can't help it, but when I hear this song, I flash back to the music video as well. I just want to start dancing. The only problem is right now I don't have a hat on, which I need to get one of those nice fedoras or top hats. Okay, we're going to give everyone just about a minute to filter in. The numbers are climbing. Welcome, welcome everybody. I'm really happy you're all here, wherever you are in the world. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. But all in all, you're all here to learn a little bit about executive presence and hear from our incredible panelists on what it means to be a leader. Okay. We're all happy now, I hope. I'll feel a little bit happier. And let's move forward. So welcome again, everybody. We are here to hear from some real executives, people that have made it in a way and are leaders, and to hear from their perspectives on what it really means to be in that position, what it took to get there, and what are the struggles, what are the resources that helped them along the way, and a variety of other questions that are gonna come up. Today, we're gonna need some questions from you, and you're also able to chat with everyone that's here. So at the bottom of your screen, there should be a chat icon. And if you click that chat icon, I want you to make sure that you select all panelists and attendees, because the default might be all panelists. So if you're chatting away, it might not actually be going to the audience members. And what I'd love to see are people connecting in the chat box. We are here to learn from our panelists. We're also here to connect and build a community. And if you're interested in executive presence, and the other people here are interested in executive presence, can we connect and support each other along the way? So please submit questions as well as they arise, because at the end of our panelist discussion, we're going to be taking questions from all of you. So if something comes up, click the Q&A window, submit your question, and I'll be able to review it and pitch it to our panelists later on. And while I'm doing this short introduction, it'd be great if you entered into the chat where you're calling in from. And what's something that you're here to learn? What is an initial question that you have? What drew you to this workshop? So let's start engaging in that chat box. Let's see where everyone's calling in from and what you're here for. So my name is Dr. Benjamin Ritter. I'm going to be your host tonight. I am an expert, I would say, I guess, in organizational leadership, but more importantly, I'm incredibly passionate about guiding leaders to create a career that they love. And through working with clients, this topic of executive presence came up over and over and over again. And when something shows up, I tend to pay attention, and especially when it shows up multiple times. And it was really discouraging to me to be working with these executives, these high achievers, people that have honestly, to some, achieved what it means to be successful in your professional life, doubting themselves and not really sure what it means to have executive presence, their vision as a leader, confidence in themselves, to be able to develop and guide teams. And since I host events, I said, well, why not we host an event on this topic? And I hosted a workshop, and it was a huge hit. We had a lot of people interested in it. And, I work closely with one of the panelists here. We've done a couple of events together, and we're always looking for an opportunity to collaborate. And I said, there needs to be more content around this. We need to hear from people that are living this each and every single day. And so I connected with Charlotte, and with her incredible networking and community building skills, she was able to source some amazing panelists. And I'm going to introduce them all to you. But this became the panel that you're at. And then eventually as well, this is turning into a podcast. So I'm going to be interviewing some of our panelists. Hopefully they all want to join, as well as other executives, to share their stories on what it truly means to be a leader. This is a topic that is important to your professional success, and not just that, but to how you feel as a leader. And so, and that honestly, like, why do we work? We work to hopefully enjoy life a little bit more, and knowing that you're an executive and feeling good about your executive presence is honestly just a way to feel good about work and life overall. So let's get to our panelists. I mentioned Charlotte. She is one of the brainchilds behind this event. And in her day-to-day, she is the managing consultant, SVP, and ICEO advisor in the New York office of Lee, Hecht, and Harrison, which is the world's largest art placement firm. Her coaching skills are renowned, and she's won multiple awards, including the firm's Global Coach of the Year award, amongst others. Now, she does service. She is very service oriented, as you'll notice from a lot of the executives that are here on the panel today, and has served as the executive director for 5 different nonprofits, including the Habitat for Humanity, and is featured in multiple media outlets, including CNBC, NPR, the Wall Street Journal, Bloomberg Radio. You know, there's those little media channels. But if you want to hear more from her, especially how to find the perfect job, make sure you look up one of her 2 books, The Dead Mouse, The Secret to Finding Your Perfect Job, on Amazon. Now, one of our other panelists, Jeff Hunt, we actually met through his podcast, Human Capital, which interviews top business thought leaders and really tries to uncover the deeply human aspect of work. He is the president and CEO of GoalSpan, which is a performance management SaaS business located in the San Francisco Bay Area. He is a unique CEO because not only did he start really young, and hopefully touches on that experience, but he also understands HR, and that combination leads him to be an incredibly impactful executive. I'd also like to introduce Sean, who is the former SVP of Strategy and Business Operations at BET Networks and former member of the board of directors of BET Plus. I haven't touched on this yet, but this is relatively new. He is now the SVP of Streaming Strategy at Paramount Plus and PlutoTV. So I hope he touches on this transition, because transitions as an executive, what does that take? What motivates you to do that? You're at this pinnacle point in your career. What are you looking for next? What motivates that transition? So he's also an Emmy voter. He was featured in a 2018 HBS case study, and again, service-oriented as a board of director member for T. Howard and NAMIC, as well as an entrepreneur, co-founder of Socks for Shelters. You'll notice too, a lot of our executives have been featured have been recognized for awards, and he has been featured by the industry publication CableFax as one of the most influential multi-ethnic media executives. Okay, last but certainly not least, Hope Knight, who is the president and CEO of Greater Jamaica Development Corporation. She is focused on advancing the economic growth and community building, as well as sustainable real estate within the Southeast Queens region. She also serves on the New York City Planning Commission as a commissioner. Prior to GJBC, she was also the COO of the Upper Manhattan Empowerment Zone, as well as the vice president. She had multiple executive positions here actually at Morgan Stanley. Service-oriented again, serves on multiple boards, and again, featured for their accomplishments through multiple awards and media outlets. It's just to name one of many, and Crane's New York Business List of 2021 notable in real estate. So those are our panelists. They are so impressive to me. I hope they're impressive to you. Their accomplishments are of the top 1%. And so hopefully you're ready to dive into the journey of what it takes to become an executive. Now, again, we'll have time for questions at the end, so feel free to log them into the Q&A area of the webinar. And let's begin. So I want to touch on, what is your executive superpower? And why is that important for you as an executive? And let's start off. Hope, can you chime in here?
Absolutely. It's great to be here and great to see so many people from around the country. So my superpower is the ability to conceive an idea, line up the right resources, people, capital, and execute against that and have a project come out on the other side. I am in the process of developing a co-working space, identified raw space, was able to find the right people to be involved in developing that space, identified the capital, and we are now in construction, and we'll have a 10,000 square foot space to provide support for small businesses in the Southeast Queens community.
Wow. I want you on my X-Men team. Is that okay? Can you join up? Would
Sure.
anyone else like to add?
Yeah, I would say my superpower is I'm highly intuitive. My mother was clairvoyant, and so I'm highly intuitive, and so I can sort of ebb and flow with relationships and recalibrate and be quite disarming, so that my communication with everyone, regardless of who they are and where they are, tends to be quite good, quite authentic, and enormously rewarding for me, I hope. And that intuition really saves me in so many ways, because for me, all my work the one common thread that comes through my whole life as a child to my life as a grandma is people, and having the intuition to connect with them is my superpower.
I'll jump in, Ben, and share that my superpower is absolutely curiosity. I have been naturally curious since I was 2 years old and disassembled the exam light in the pediatrician's office before my mom could discover that I took it apart. And so I think that asking the right questions sets leaders apart from managers. It's served me extremely well over my career. It has so many benefits, including improved engagement with your employees and also deepening of relationships. When we ask the right questions, not only do we get better relationships, not only with employees, but all stakeholders, whether they're internal or external, but we end up with a more collaborative approach and better decisions around vision, where we're taking the organization, strategies. So yeah, without further ado, curiosity is where it's at for me.
That's awesome, Jeff. And Ben, thank you again for including us today. And I was asked the same question a couple of years ago when the new leadership took over our network, and it's a very strange question to me. I never thought about it, but I would say for me, it's the ability to bring people together and really have people collaborate, organize them, and then align their goals for success. So I really enjoy working with groups. I want others to collaborate and be really transparent. I want them to feel empowered and energized and inspired, but aligned, so we're all kind of going after the same goal.
You know, I hear curiosity, intuition, strategy, bringing people together, that collaboration. And these are your superpowers. You've identified them as this is something that is one of my strengths. Are there superpowers that just are needed by an executive? That maybe we can lump them into this concept of executive presence. And I guess this just gets into the definition of this is executive presence. And so if I was to put a bunch of executives in a room, I would say these are maybe their top 3 traits, or this is their top 1 trait. I don't know how many there are. I don't know if there are any even. And maybe you have different opinions on that. So what do we think?
I'd love to see resilience and empathy be at the top 2. I think an empathetic leader is a great leader. And so I'm looking always to be more empathetic and eternally resilient.
So I have a couple that I think about, Ben. One is you really have to be able to inspire and communicate a vision, right? If you are the president of a huge organization with hundreds and hundreds of direct reports, every meeting that you go to, people are really looking to you to really understand your clear vision so they can follow those marching orders. Number 2, this is one that's not often discussed, but I really do think you have to be a subject matter expert and have technical skills. You can't just kind of land in and think that you're going to have this magical executive presence and lead these huge organizations. You do actually have to have some background, technical or product or analytical knowledge. So, you know, the organization can quickly see that you're one of them and understand that you can roll up your sleeves. And then lastly, you really have to be able to communicate among the top 1% and be able to influence others. And that is a key skill that I think for someone to really who's mastered, you know, the skill of executive presence is able to influence others.
I would add to what Sean said. I absolutely agree with everything he said. I'm just reflecting on the fact that for me, executive presence, the word presence is really the embodiment of respect, which is something that's earned. Being an executive doesn't mean that you necessarily have a presence that's respected. And so that comes from a place of creating a culture where there's psychological safety, having people be able to speak up and disagree with you, having, as Sean said, a compelling vision that people really want to get behind, and the ability to communicate that vision persuasively and authentically and vulnerably, being willing to admit your mistakes, asking, like I just said, asking the right questions. And I really do think it comes down to communicating persuasively, making decisive decisions, thinking strategically, and bringing humility and vulnerability.
And I also agree with everything that's been said. I also think when people think about executive presence, they also think about sort of who and what you're around. And so also thinking about being able to identify a strong team and being associated with that.
So I hear these traits, identifying a strong team, communication, technical skills, vision, a big one, as well as empathy. It sounds like a little bit of emotional intelligence coming out. How does one even start with that? And I'm like, what do I even want to know more about? Is it building trust? Is it vision? I think honestly, the vision piece sticks out to me the most, and I probably get the most questions on it as a coach. How does one identify their leadership vision? And that's a big question. And maybe it's, how have you identified your leadership vision? And I might put someone on the spot here just because this is a tough one. Hope, do you have something to add?
Yes. So I've been able to identify my leadership vision, pairing it with the mission of the organizations that I've had to lead. So to the extent that I am trying to provide services, resources to underserved people, that sort of guides my leadership vision. It gives me a sense of what it is I need to do and how I need to do it.
And Ben, that's exactly what I was going to say, was I don't actually like to think about it as your personal leadership vision anymore. Real leaders have stepped beyond that, and they are communicating the mission and the vision of the organization that's then meeting some greater cause for society. And when someone's talking at that level, it's really easy then to get hundreds of people behind that vision or that company mission. So it's not just about the politics and that singular person's success. It's about everyone's success, and so the company can grow and meet its goals.
Quick follow-up for you, Sean, because you mentioned persuasion or influence. And how do you then influence your team or the people around you that the vision is important, or connect it to maybe what their personal vision is?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, because a lot of people may not believe in that vision, or just, there's those colleagues that just want to debate every issue to death. I think if you can understand what motivates someone and show them that there's personal growth and professional growth in their future as they align and contribute to that vision, I think that helps them understand, how or it helps motivate them to kind of get on board.
Creating that personal connection to the organization. And I mean, then in itself, is that's just transparency, which builds greater trust, Jeff, to what you were mentioning as well.
Yes, exactly. I think that authenticity and transparency are absolutely key to building trust, and trust is the undergirding of all good cultures, which, by the way, I would take it one step further and say that culture is really the ultimate differentiator in organizations, because you can go copy pricing strategies and product modeling and go to markets, and you can try to hire away employees, but ultimately they are not going to be able to copy your culture. And that's why people are going to want to stay with you. Your turnover is going to go down. You're going to end up with better products and make a difference in the world.
Anything to add before I move on? Okay, wonderful. So let's have a little fun. We got really serious for a second. And I want to know, what is your favorite thing, the most favorite thing about being able to wake up and live this executive life? Charlotte,
I would
would you
say
like to
my
jump in?
favorite thing is the magnitude. So the work that I do instead of, my mother used to tease me about too much that is given, much is expected. And you should go sprinkle pixie dust as many places as you possibly can, because you have to give back. That is your job. Your job is to give, not to get. And so, which is the nature of my book. This is all about giving, because the more you give, the more you get. It's a very interesting thing. And so what gets me out of bed in the morning very early is I impact a lot of lives positively in a wonderful, wonderful way. And I am honored and privileged to do it. And the fact that people trust me to do it is such a high, such a natural high. And so I'm absolutely exhausting to the people around me, because it, unfortunately, as an extrovert, it really gets me going. I already wake up kind of like that. So I think it is exhausting for people around me. I said something about people are in the right lane. Some people are in the middle lane. I'm in a little bit in the left lane. And one of my coaches said, Charlotte, you're in the right lane going 90. So it's just the impact that I can have because people trust me and believe me. And we partner so well together. And I have this very small niche, but I'm really good at it. And people climb in, and it's such a high because it makes their life better. And that's why I'm here. That's my job. That's definitely my job. And so it's a natural high all day, every day. And I'm pretty tireless about it.
I just want to second that everything she said, I agree with. She's not making any of it up. I do believe her. I trust her, and I send all my friends to her. So she's telling everyone the truth.
That pixie dust is real.
I'm lucky, very lucky.
It's interesting that you mentioned that too, because you mentioned that you're intuitive, and that they build upon each other. And a lot of our executive presence is a culmination of our traits that are interwoven, that has created this ultimate inner strength of who we are. And I'd say that is really our leadership vision. That is our presence. Okay, who else would love to share their most favorite thing?
Yeah, so I work in television, right? And just for background, I watched a lot of TV growing up. You know, I said I was going to work in TV, and people were like, that's a great pipe dream. My parents were so frustrated that they asked me to read books about television, and that just kind of fed the fire. You know, it didn't help, right? So now Spike Lee said, you know, television is the most powerful storytelling medium out there. It's more powerful than film or the written word or music. And so to be a part of this industry, to be a network executive, there's a famous show from the 90s on Showtime that was called Beggars and Choosers. And it was about a group of TV executives that were all crazy. And I remember 20 years ago being like, they have the best job. And now I'm living that life. And so it's just so exciting to be a part of an industry that's so influential. And it's so much fun. And we're really out there to entertain Americans and make you happy and help you close out your day and bring you news and information and entertainment. And so it's more for me, the industry that I get to work in is like a dream. And the fact that I get to come into work and talk about TV and vote on TV and read scripts and talk about services. I don't even consider it work. It's just so much fun.
So I would like to say that very similar to Charlotte in that I have the ability to serve and be an advocate for underserved people. And although I serve a very narrow footprint in a portion of New York City, I have the ability to influence policy nationally. And so having the ability to work through philanthropy, financial institutions, elected officials, that really does get me going.
I love hearing the passion from all of you, and it's just very heartwarming. I love getting up to do my job every day. And I actually, Ben mentioned at the beginning, I host a podcast as a side job. It's actually not my day job, but I had the opportunity to interview somebody today who made a comment that really stuck with me. And he said, his primary job and motivation is that everybody has a light switch on their heart, and you can either turn it on or turn it off. And it's just like the one on the wall that turns your light on and off. And I felt like that resonates with me. The thing that motivates me is trying to turn that light switch on people's heart when I can. I just love business. I love the opportunity to touch every part of the business in my job. I get to see what's going on with sales and product development and finance, and I get to interact with customers. And we're in a unique space in the software business where it's this great combination of art and science. So we get to put together software and write code that is hopefully going to be beautiful, that people will use to solve problems, to improve their lives and their performance and effectiveness. So I love it.
I have to ask, because as someone that is also connected to his work through meaning and through purpose, and that's what it sounds like the thread is here, that you're all in unique industries, but you all feel connected to what you do, which is pretty neat. It's incredible. And I don't know many executives that would say they're not. Well, I do, because they come to me as clients because they're ready to leave their job. I wonder how much of a similar thread that would be to people that have achieved a certain level of success. They have to have that piece of meaning as well. But sometimes when you have that much meaning, you can forget that you need to turn the off switch on yourself for a second and take a break. And it can lead to maybe overworking or not having certain boundaries that you might need to live a healthier lifestyle. And honestly, a lot of the youth that I mentor are afraid of becoming an executive. And I'm wondering, how do you manage like work-life balance? And what have you done to create that for yourself? Or maybe you haven't and want to share that it is a struggle. Who would love to chime in here first?
I'm going to go first. Sorry, I got to hit that one up because I do think, sorry guys, I do think some women have a harder time with this and have a very big responsibility at home. And what the research has shown that much of that falls on the women. And COVID has been especially hard on women. And the number of women who've left the workforce is gigantic compared to men, absolutely gigantic. I didn't pull those numbers up, but it was staggering when I saw them. So I do think this is something that's a problem. It's been a problem since I started on Wall Street in 1980. I remember it then, I remember it now. It's a different issue now. I think it's talked about in a way it wasn't talked about before, like a little dirty secret kind of thing. You were always supposed to hide your wedding ring and hide the fact that you had a child and hide the fact that you were pregnant and all this kind of stuff, which I know it sounds crazy to people on the phone, but I'm substantially older perhaps than others, and that's the way it was. And so at the end of the day, I do think now with COVID, it's even harder because your workday starts in the house at 5, whenever anyone gets up in the morning, and then it just goes, and there's no boundaries. So it's not like you leave your home, you commute to your office, you then shut off your office, you go home. It's just nonstop. I mean, Sean, I see you're in the office, maybe Jeff, you're in an office. It's rare that people are in the office now, very rare. We're not being asked to go back till January. So that'll be 2 years of being out of the office, almost. So I think the boundaries are very thin now. And so they do show that small breaks is the key. You can't just stop at noon, have lunch for 20 minutes, and that's the end. So what I have done is put in my calendar. Every once in a while, my boss will try to put something in the calendar and say, you've got this 15-minute thing at 10:45. What is that? And that is my break. It's a yoga stretch. It's a walk around the yard. It's getting a cup of tea. I don't care what it is. It's calling a girlfriend. It could be, I don't know. It could be anything. But I take small breaks throughout the whole day because my day starts extraordinarily early and goes extraordinarily late. And now because I'm not commuting and I'm not traveling, I'm sitting in this chair. It's worse. And I tend to have that bad habit anyway. So you do need to put some mechanisms in place, and you need to put them into an appointment book like it's an appointment. Because if I don't take care of me, I can't take care of anyone else. So a little bit of self-care is in order here. And that's part of being an executive, is managing your time and self-care.
I have so many holes in my calendar. It's the hardest part though, is respecting them, as honoring yourself. I think I'm so able to honor everyone else, clients, events, right? Networking conversations. And part of being the best executive, the best person, the best employee, the best, professional is to honor myself first.
I would just echo Charlotte's comments fully. And first of all, there's kind of a one word response to this question that could be super helpful. And it's called no. So if you can learn how to say no and then say yes to the right things, that's really the first step, in my opinion. I would say before we get to no and before we get to yes, in terms of balance, we have to go back and take inventory and get super crystal clear on what our motivations and our objectives are for everything that we do. And then ruthlessly manage your calendar, just like Charlotte said. So I do everything I can to stop working at a specific time every day, no matter what happens. I don't allow things to be scheduled outside that time frame. And if somebody says, well, I need to meet then I say, I'm sorry, then I guess we can't meet, or we'll find a different time. But I'm not an expert at this. It ebbs and flows. Sometimes I do very poorly at it. And then I suffer either physically or with sleep. And then I have to reboot and get back on the horse again and make sure I follow those disciplines. But they're usually pretty pragmatic and they're pretty simple. They're not necessarily easy to implement, but they're relatively simple if we just follow some sort of main disciplines and create some habits.
And I agree with both Jeff and Charlotte. I have had to get to a place where I can say no. I am moving along the spectrum so that I don't want to feel bad about saying no. I still feel bad about saying no, and I know I need to move past that. And so that is something that I'm working on. And I definitely have taken up Charlotte's tactic of scheduling time in my calendar so that I'm not, packed back to back, because, you need time to not only rejuvenate, but to think. Sometimes we get so caught up in doing task to task, just don't have time to spend to contemplate.
Yeah, and similar to what I think what Jeff was saying was and then Charlotte, to kind of manage your day and make sure you've carved out time for yourself, which I call maintenance time. And so for me, that's in the morning. Like, I don't do breakfast meetings because morning is the time that I'm going to spend with my daughters. I might drop them off to school. I'm definitely going to work out, get some errands done. And then once I'm at the office, I'm at the office. And I'll definitely do lunch meetings and dinner meetings and drinks. And I may not get home till 8, 9, 10. But I've taken care of myself in the morning and really set that time aside for what I need to get done. And here sometimes, back to your question about work-life balance also, it's one really high-level executive once mentioned something around work-life integration. It sounds crazy, right? She's very senior, very successful. She's been here for like 20 or 30 years. And her point is that sometimes you can't necessarily set those boundaries, and depending on your industry, like we work in television, so it's a little different. She spent a lot of time developing her closest colleagues into her closest friends, She's really built deep relationships here, and she now thinks all her best friends work in this building, right? And this is someone who's, has to be over 50, and kind of integrated her colleagues into anything that may be social and fun also, right? And I've taken that page out of her playbook a little bit and really started to spend more time developing, really deep relationships with my colleagues that I now consider friends. And that really does then help from kind of like, you just don't always feel like you're working and collaborating and thinking about work. You also then do have downtime with those folks that you spend a lot of time with.
That's a really powerful suggestion. I'd take it one step even further and say, can you be intentional about the environment around you, not just from colleagues, but from professionals and other friends that you meet? So are you going out there as an executive? I mean, if this is a work, a job that you feel is connected to a greater purpose or meaning, then can you, alter your environment in a way where you are networking with similar organizations or organizations that bring you more joy, allow you to integrate your work into your life, but not also just be directly associated with work. Yeah, thanks for mentioning that. You mentioned, Sean, kind of a little bit about your day. I don't take breakfast meetings, and kind of went through a little bit of what your day was like.
Don't tell anyone that though. It's just between it's between
just
100
between us
and us, okay?
and 170 other people, and everyone that receives the 400 other people that will probably receive the recording.
Exactly.
But I love those rules. I'd be, I'm interested in what is a day like in the life of you as an executive. And I think this is really important, by the way, for individual contributors or new executives, where maybe their roles have changed drastically. Where, you were mentioning your superpowers in the beginning. It's curiosity, intuition, strategy. This person's like, what do you mean? I just spent 6 hours making a PowerPoint. Like, when do I have time for strategy and intuition? So I'd love to hear from all of you. Sean, you unmuted.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of strategy and intuition that goes into a PowerPoint, by the way. Don't throw any shade at our PowerPoint.
I'm sorry, I apologize.
So I would say that, as I told you, my days are really fun. I love coming to the office, even though there's nobody here right now. And so what I would say is it's shifted over the past couple of years from where there was a lot of time that was spent specifically for analysis and reading and becoming a subject matter expert on various topics, and kind of really doing your job. And now as I lead more and more people and work with more and more folks, a lot of my time is spent in meetings, obviously, one-on-one meetings, checking in, setting direction, seeing where they are with their work, helping guide them with their analysis and their takeaways and the POV that they're putting together for the team. And then a lot of collaborative meetings with other senior leaders to make sure that we're communicating and we're transparent with where we are with certain huge initiatives to make sure that everyone's on the same page and no one's running rogue. But yeah, a lot of meetings with my team, and I'm happy to roll up my sleeves and work side by side with them and make sure, that I can show them that I can do what they're doing and do their job, but also making sure I'm providing good feedback and guidance. But what I always tell everyone is you can't spend your entire day in meetings. Like, there are some folks in corporate that just go from meeting to meeting. I don't think, no offense to anyone, I don't know how much work you're getting done. Like, if you're not spending time reading, thinking, putting your thoughts on paper, writing PowerPoints, doing analysis, whatever, how are you pushing, these projects forward in your downtime? And so for someone like me, then that happens a lot on Sundays and in the evening, unfortunately, right? But that's the commitment that I'm willing, of course, to contribute to where I am. But try to spend less time in meetings and more time really digging into the work. I hope I answered your question, Ben.
You did. And I like how you put that disclaimer of, sometimes the thinking does happen on Sunday. I mean, I have to admit, most of the executives I've worked with, that's when the thinking gets done, or during the early morning workouts. And so there are certain sacrifices that are made, certain adjustments that you make to be in the position that you're in. But it comes with a lot of benefits. And those benefits, you've decided in terms of the strategy of your day and outline of your day are worth it.
I was going to say two things. Mine happened in the middle of the night, and I kept driving my spouse crazy, and I began to keep a pad and a pen next to the bed, and I actually can write this stuff with the pad and the pen in the dark, quietly, without waking anybody else up, which has taken me 40 years to figure out how to do. But I now do that, and you'd be surprised. I can actually read it in the morning, and I come up with some really good ideas, like at 20 after 1. And I don't understand why that happens. I'm sure there's something very interesting that goes on at a time where my brain is completely quiet. But there are firms that carve out 20% of your day to think. And they say to you, You have 20% of your day to think up some innovation, some inventive stuff, some cool stuff. Go take your 20% of your day. And I have friends who work at those firms, and I have such respect for them and the firm and the fact that they do what I say to do, which is to carve out the time to do that, because it not only makes the synapse jump, it makes you take risks and it makes you do something different. And I do think leaders take risks. I do think I've taken stretch jobs that I thought, holy crap, I hope they don't find out that I can't do this job. Like, holy crumbs, on a plane, going to do something and, jumping out of a plane and giving my kidney to my sister. I have done many things in my life, splunking, that I really said to myself, oh crap, I hope I could do this. Like, I would say yes. And then of course, as I'm jumping out, pulling the chute, saying, well, I hope this works out. So I'm not saying I'm not thoughtful, but I take risks that I think are manageable, because I do think leaders take risks. I think they have to, and they have to make mistakes. And every time I make one, I think to myself, okay, Charlotte, what did you learn? So I make a mistake every single day, but I don't make the same one. I make a different one, but I make one every day. And I want to continue to do that as I age. Don't laugh. But you hit a certain age, and I worry about not taking risks. People don't, want to ski because they don't want me to fall and break a hip. Tough. I'm going to ski, and I'm going to fall, and something's going to break. You know what? Take a risk. We only have this one life. That great stupid t-shirt people used to walk around wearing used to drive me crazy. Life is not a dress rehearsal. And I thought, what a stupid thing to say. And you know what? I don't think it's so stupid now. Now that I finished my bucket list, for anyone who's ever had a bucket list, I finished my bucket list the month before COVID hit to see the Taj Mahal. I had it on my list. Everybody who was going with me declined, and I went to India alone to see the Taj Mahal. So you got to take these risks, because you got one shot at this. And the most that's going to happen is it doesn't work out. Okay. Didn't work out. Dust yourself off. What did you learn? And don't do it again. Maybe do something else again.
And that's the tenacity and perseverance we were talking about earlier, Ben. Like, every executive has tenacity and perseverance and is able to quickly bounce back.
I'll expand and just say, failure isn't failure and success really isn't success. They're both just progress. And as an executive, your role is to figure out what fails so you can figure out what is success. And that's also personally. You don't internalize, what happens within the organization. You're just more so set on a specific mission. Not to put words in anyone's mouth, but I just expanded that out. And Jeff, you had something to add?
I agree with both Sean and Charlotte wholeheartedly. I'm just going to pile on to what Sean said about meetings. I think there's more time wasted in the world in business meetings than we probably would be. It would be a staggering amount of money if we really thought about it. So that's the first thing I would say is we have to ruthlessly weed out unproductive and unhelpful meetings. And we have to define, what is this meeting about? What's our desired outcome? You could have a meeting that's actually to build relationships, and that's perfectly fine. That's very different than a strategic meeting where we're going to be talking about strategies and where we're going and how we're going to get there. And so that's one thing I would add. I also would just say, in terms of my day, going back to your question, Ben, focusing on the business rather than, working on the business rather than working for the business. It kind of goes back to Michael Gerber's classic, The E-Myth. If I can really be strategic with my time and make sure that I'm not getting too tactical and focus on what my primary objectives are every day, then eventually, even though it's going to take me a while, I'm going to get there. I might have some bumps. I'm going to have some heartache. Stuff's going to happen that I don't expect. Sometimes really bad stuff like COVID, but we're going to get through it. And maybe we have to switch gears and switch our direction a little bit. But at the end of the day, if I continue to focus working on the business, more strategic versus tactical, that's going to benefit me and my organization in the long run.
And, every morning I take a look at my schedule and probably loaded up with a bunch of meetings, but I am very deliberate about what is it do I want to accomplish today? What are the most important things I need to get done today? And so sometimes, because I've made that assessment, I'll cancel a few meetings because I realize this is not important. I don't need to do this today. Can move this around. So that's been really helpful for me.
There's this high level altitude that I'm hearing from everybody. You know, you have a sight on the business and on yourself that leads to the success of yourself and the business, which is pretty powerful and sometimes can be lost if you're stuck in the work all the time, especially as an individual contributor. So thank you all for sharing that. Before we move into the Q&A portion, I did have a question about achievement. And, you know, Sean, you mentioned this resilience that we keep talking about. And I imagine everyone here has worked really hard to get to where they are today. And so you probably were pretty driven to get there. And does it ever feel like you've gotten there? Does it ever feel like you've made it? Or do you always have sights set on the next thing? And I'll push this over to, let's see who, Charlotte first.
So I'm not, so I made it already. I mean, I've got a big check in the box for a perfect life. I have more than any one woman deserves or needs. I'm very lucky. I'm surrounded by health and family and friends and love. And I have no desire. When I was an investment banker, I was very focused on it. I was an analyst, and I was an associate, and then I was, you know, I was very focused on getting promoted and moving up the ladder, as it were. Once I made a certain amount of money and made it to the top of the rung that I wanted to be, it wasn't actually very interesting to me anymore up there. But I remember being very focused on getting promoted. And I was pregnant one of the years that I should have been cycled in as a VP. And, you know, I got passed over, you know, anyway, there was this whole, now I can look back on it and have a big laugh, but I can promise you at the time, I didn't think it was amusing at all. And I was pretty ticked off. But the reality is, I feel very lucky, and I am going to continue to do what I'm doing. It's not about making more money. It's about helping more people. And so I finished my bucket list, which is amazing. I'm over the moon about that. And I have the ability to do what I want to do, when I want to do it, with whom I wish. And so I consider that an incredible gift and my main get in life.
Anyone else about the mountaintop? I see Jeff unmuted.
I would just say that mountaintop's great, but maybe a little overrated. I think enjoy your own journey. Don't get too fixated on either becoming an executive or being in the C-suite, although that's a great goal. So there's nothing wrong with that goal. Be tenacious about your goals and what you believe in, but I think it's a healthier perspective to hold the outcome loosely. Just be present with where you are today. And of course, pursue your goals, have grit, have tenacity, like Sean said. Eventually, you're going to progress, and take a little praise for that. And then hold the outcome loosely.
I had a client, and hold on, I want Hope to chime in first. Go on.
No, I was just going to say that I'm just really focused on the process. You know, every day there's something new and different to do, and getting through that process gets me to the next place.
So just to add to that, and I think it reflects on this process focus, is, you know, there isn't a mountaintop, there's just a mountain, and you're the mountain. And the things that you do are just trails along the way. I think someone that has not maybe achieved a certain level of success still thinks that success is going to help them feel like they've accomplished and reached the mountaintop. But I haven't met someone that says there really is one. Like they end up becoming happy with the process or the environment and just the day to day. So thank you all for sharing that. It's okay if anyone says no, by the way. I'm waiting for someone to be like, this is executive presence and all of you are wrong. Okay. Do you have anything to add before we go into the Q&A section? Okay. One of the first questions that I saw pop up was, how do you actually figure out your superpower? And Sean, let's go to you for this one.
Oh, I was hoping you wouldn't call on me for that one. So I think you have to be a part of various different 360 processes over the years, and through those kind of feedback loops through your colleagues, you'll really start to understand what your strengths are. And as you kind of read through the detail every year, and sometimes it can be brutal, you'll really be able to figure out where your superpower is. Some people just know, but for others, I think it comes from kind of hearing it from the colleagues that kind of know you the best over the years.
Real quick, on a show of hands with thumbs up, how many of the executives on the panel have gone through a 360-degree assessment, a 360 feedback? Okay, all thumbs up. And for people listening, that basically means you get feedback from people that work for you. Any thoughts on that? How do you deal with negative feedback or critical feedback? Is that tough? Is it easy?
No, it's you should be grateful and thankful that you're getting that feedback earlier in your career than later in your career. There's another coach that's like you, Ben, and like you, Charlotte. She wrote the book called The 5% Principle. And if you can get that feedback early and just adjust your EQ and kind of your professional or your executive presence by 2, 3, 4, 5% max, it can make drastic changes. No one's saying don't be authentic or change your personality or change the way that you walk and talk. There's just slight changes that everyone kind of needs to make to their daily demeanor that will really help kind of pivot their path to success. And you won't know what those are until you hear from others.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And I didn't want to interrupt other people if they had something to answer in terms of the superpower question as well, or about 360 feedback. If not, we can move on. Okay, so the next question was, how do you ask better questions? And Hope, would you like to chime in?
Yeah, I think you have to have a inherent curiosity to ask better questions. And I think to the extent that you really pair your curiosity with what's happening in your workplace, I think the questions will flow. But you have to have a genuine interest. And I think that that's how you can get to better questions.
I'll add one to that, Ben, that if we are asking questions that are focused on our ability to improve engagement and relationship, and also help those around us come up with the answers of how they can do things better, so they're actually empowering questions, then we're going to end up with better decisions and ultimately a better culture.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask, what is the importance of questions? I mean, thank you for filling that in. And questions can help others develop. I mean, most people can figure out the answer to something if you give them the opportunity to. And that's a great way to develop talent, as well as to help people feel more engaged, which as an executive, if you're trying to retain your talent and grow your talent, that is a way to help them feel like they matter and that they're making an impact as well. Now, I see a couple questions in the Q&A about female executives. How can you lead with empathy and still be respected in a way? And so the question is, what can be highlighted as a good pair for a high EQ? How can women balance leading with empathy while retaining their leadership qualities? So Charlotte, you mentioned a few things about female leadership in the past. Can you chime in?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'd say two things. I do think we all need, men and women need role models. And I have had very good mentors and very good role models in my life. And I've sought them out. And it was one woman when I was an investment banker. I get myself invited to meetings that I knew she was going to be at. And she literally would look across the table thinking, what is this kid doing in here? Like, get out. Who are you? Why are you dressed like me? And get out. I would have gotten coffee. I mean, I would have done anything to be with her because she was incredibly brilliant. Everyone was listening to every word she said. She had very innovative ideas in a time that was very few women in the world doing what she was doing. So I did find role models, and I would knock on their door and ask if I could meet with them. Would they be willing to speak with me? I never asked for more than 10 minutes because people are busy, but you need a role model. You need mentors. You need help. You need to ask for help. You need to ask for help. You cannot do this, alone. And I do think you need to ask for help. I do think there are a couple of books that are really helpful. There's a wonderful book by Amy Cuddy called Presence, which I thought was wonderful. She has a great TED Talk called Power Posing, because I do think there's a physicality that goes with executive presence. And I had a lovely young woman that worked with me that was 5 feet tall. She weighed about 94 pounds. She was one of the tiniest humans I'd ever seen. And when you walk into a room full of people and you're trying to command the room of 3,000 people and you're 5 feet tall and you weigh 96 pounds, it's very hard to do it versus a big presence. I'm a big gal. I take up a lot of space, and I think it's a little easier. So just learning how to use your body and how to use your voice is really helpful. Reading books. There's a great EQ book by a guy named Dan Goleman. So you understand about your EQ and how high is your EQ. So reading the books, finding the role models, modeling the behavior, and making sure your body language is aligned with your messaging.
And I agree with Charlotte. I think finding role models, particularly when you're early in your career and you're trying to develop your executive presence, I think that's really important. But the thing that I would really want to emphasize is that you have to be authentically you. You have to be your authentic self, because that's the only thing that's going to get you to the place where you want to be.
Ben, I saw a really good Q&A. It's timestamped your time 5:46. I think that'd be a good one.
Yeah, can you read it to us and go for it?
Are executives born, or can anyone gain or improve their executive presence? So I've thought about this a lot, and executives are definitely not born. If you think about the folks that were the leaders in your high schools, they are definitely probably not the leaders today across America in politics or entertainment or anything. And if we do believe that executives are born, then every executive would, no offense, be a white male, right? And so, there's just that implied bias in everything that in every day. So you can definitely improve your executive presence. Please trust me. It comes with the coaching that Charlotte's talking about, the mentoring, having friends, and kind of it comes from practice. There's studies that have been done that C-suite executives that then took a year off when they got back in front of a boardroom, stumbled, and just it's not like those skills came right back to them. And you have to kind of practice having that executive presence. You have to practice those communication skills. You have to practice presenting. And it comes from doing that over and over again, right? There's that what is that 10,000 hour rule for musicians and athletes, and I think it's the same thing in business. So I don't know if anyone else has anything to add to that.
I would just add that there's a misnomer that you have to be an extrovert to be an executive, and that's not the case. I know a lot of incredible executives that are introverts. And so if you happen to fall on the introversion side of the spectrum, there's plenty of hope. Just do those things that Sean just mentioned.
I agree. There's a lot of introverts here, even in media and entertainment, which you wouldn't expect. And very, very successful and have great executive presence. Yeah.
And part of executive presence is fitting in with the executives around you in a way towards how they are executives or what the organization's expectations are for executives. So pay attention to how executives are leading, how they're conducting meetings, how they're reaching out for project updates, how maybe they act when you're in a meeting with them, and even approach them for advice. Say, I'm really interested in developing my executive presence. Can we work together? And what might develop from that? In terms of the introvert piece, there's been a little bit of a struggle because of the virtual environment and how it's a lot harder to answer a question immediately when you're kind of put on the spot, and as well as now you're staring at a camera, so that amplifies any sort of nervousness or anxiety for some people that maybe struggle with the presentation skills or speaking up and loud, where you may have to interrupt someone in a virtual environment where you have to, in this environment, it feels even more weird to talk over somebody. So you're constantly waiting for people to finish their thought. And so as an introvert, if you know this is part of how you think and how you react, you could approach your leaders separately and say, when you give us an assignment or a question, can we actually have 5 minutes to brainstorm? Or can we have a Miro board? Or can we brainstorm in the chat box? Or can we brainstorm in a document? So that's something that works really well to adjust for an introvert personality. Another piece is to learn, how to raise your hand within a meeting itself, or to use the chat function to ensure that you're being heard without having to actually speak up and out in front of people and maybe be aggressive. So try to figure out strategies that work for you. And those are some things that have worked for people that I've worked with, and even myself, because sometimes I don't feel that charismatic or enthusiastic or extroverted.
Two small things people could do, Ben, if you don't mind. I wanted to add, one was I run a lot of sessions like this, and I'm surprised how many people don't put their visual on. So now when I do these as a volunteer, no one is permitted to be on without the visual. So we're all out there and we are all sharing as humans, and you are in a safe place and no one's going to hurt you here. So I don't do them anymore unless I can look at you. I want you to look at me and I want to look at you. So I will say Zoom has really made me a little bit of a nut about the visual, but I don't run meetings with the visual not being on. I do think it is a way to help you with executive presence and to help you with your how you feel about yourself during this ridiculous remote time that isn't going away. Even when we do go back to the office, I can see the hybrid model is going to be much more prevalent, and this Zoom is here to stay. So I do think the visual piece is important for everyone to do. The second thing is I tell people, when you go to the global town hall, I want you to raise your hand and have a question. What will your question be? Let's talk about your question. When will you say your question? How will you say your question? What are you going to look like? Are you going to stand? Are you going to sit? Let's talk about that. And asking questions in the first 10 minutes of a meeting is the best way, because making yourself wait till the end is crazy and everyone is bored and sleeping towards the end anyway. So I do think small things like that help you build your muscle of executive presence. And this is a process that takes time, and you're looking for progress, not perfection.
I love that, Charlotte, to think about forcing people to think about these global town halls that our company has and think about it before you go there and stand up and ask the question. And there's no bad question, and there's no, and you're not going to look dumb, but even I am scared today to do that. But imagine, I should have taken that advice 10 years ago when I met you, but that's so great.
Yeah, if you're an individual contributor and you're working really hard, that's wonderful. But if no one knows that you're working really hard, then your work doesn't speak for itself. And so what you need to do is go stand up, go engage, go ask a question where people aren't asking questions, and take that little extra step. Executives, all of you have to be in front of people all the time. You don't really have the choice to bow out of a situation like that. And so why not practice that now? On that note, do you have to look a certain way? Do you have to dress a certain way? Is there any expectations from executives that you've noticed or you yourself have been pressured on over the years?
I saw that in the Q&A and I started laughing. Something we don't talk about, and it was, I think the question is still there. I think it's from someone named Imran. But it's a great point. And my theory is, unfortunately, you may not like it, but yes. I mean, from every company that I've worked at, the executives always just have a very clean cut professional look, and that you can still be forward fashion and you can still be authentic, but you got to be pretty buttoned up. And that's just, and I think, Charlotte, you might agree, because I think you lectured about this in the past around getting my shoes polished, or, and you've kind of advised people around their hair and jackets, etc. See how I remember what you teach us?
I do remember. I don't remember lecturing you, Gupta, so be careful. I do think that every culture is different and every job is different. And my reality is there are folks now in some of the businesses that I coach in that are wearing ripped sweatshirts and sneakers. That is not my market. That is someone else's market, but it's definitely somebody's market, and they are executives. So I do think it's changed dramatically. My corporate market, you're right, has been extremely buttoned up. And, I would stand in the elevator with gentlemen and I would watch them shine their shoes on the back of their slacks as they rubbed the back of their slacks with their shoes because they hadn't got their shoes shined in the elevator, which I just thought was a hoot. So I think the times are changing, and it varies depending on your industry, depending on your sector, whether you're on Wall Street or whether you're in a fintech with 12 people. I just think it varies of what the look is, the physical look, but executive presence, when someone's got it, I do think it's noticeable regardless of what they're wearing. I do think I've worked with, I'm on the board of an Israeli startup, and those guys drive me crazy. They all look like they rolled out of bed. I literally feel like I'm in their bedroom and they're in their PJs and they just got out of bed. But their presence, their technical skills, they're savvy, they're amazing. So they've got it. They've got the executive presence in their crummy outfits, much to my chagrin. To my chagrin.
Times have changed, but I just wanted to say that early in my career, I consider myself an aspirational dresser. So I always dressed 1 or 2 levels up. So I kind of looked at what the folks 2 levels up from me dress like, and I tried to emulate that.
I agree with that, Hope. I also wanted to share that I would agree with Charlotte in that it's partially dependent on the culture and the type of business, but where there's intersection with what you said, Sean, is regardless, you have to be buttoned up. So even if you have more of a casual look, you have to be pretty buttoned up. I'm happen to be on the board of a fairly large wholesale distribution company. And so those people are mostly like, labor type workers that have distribution center environments. The executives are casual there, but they're definitely buttoned up. So it does make a difference.
I appreciate your perspectives. I'll share a quick story. When I actually became an executive for the first time back in 2012, I was very anti-buttoned up. And I thought that it was a badge of honor to not wear a jacket and to roll up my sleeves. And, when I reflect back on it, I realize how, that was a choice that I made that potentially could have negatively lent itself to my brand on a daily basis. And so looking around you and saying, I'm going to be 1 or 2 levels up from the people around me, that is a pretty good rule of thumb. And so thank you, Hope, for sharing that as well. Now, I've been scanning the Q&A and I have a question or 2 ready to go, but if any of the panelists have been scanning and picked one out, I'd love for you to go for it. Okay, there's been a few on mentorship, and I think we can kind of connect this with networking, and a couple on networking. And so how do you find a mentor? I mean, how do you even know what type of mentor to find? How do you connect with them? How do you build that relationship? I don't know if anyone here is mentoring or recently had someone reach out to them, or can reflect on someone that they reached out to in the past. But Hope, would you like to chime in?
So I have been mentoring a former employee for really the last decade. And, our relationship developed in the workplace, and then she moved on and we continued to be in touch. And it became clear that this was a mentorship relationship. And so I think, you want to seek out people that you have a good connection with, someone that can help you in your current work environment. It doesn't necessarily need to be someone who is in that environment, but who has an understanding of it, and help you achieve some objectives that you've set for yourself.
I think mentorship can take the form of support from peers as well. I happen to be part of a CEO peer group that I've been a part of for 10 years, different industries and spaces, but these people are willing to speak openly and authentically and challenge me where it's needed. And that in some ways acts as a mentorship relationship.
I did what Hope talked about, which is when I was in a very, looking to move up, I looked at the corporate folks 2, 3, 4, 5 levels above me. And I thought, what do I want to look like when I grow up? What do I want to look like in 3 years, 5 years, 10 years? And I sought them out. I sought them out in the cafeteria. I sought them out in meetings that I knew they were going to be invited to, that I pushed myself into. I did whatever I could to be in the elevator when they were going to be in the elevator, but I sought them out. I figured out who they were. And by the way, it wasn't just women, it was men and women. And so it's something you got to look. I could figure out who the hypos were, the high potentials. I could figure out who had been promoted, who wasn't promoted. So there are ways for you to figure out what you want to look like when you grow up, and to move that way. It's best to pick those folks and go after them. There wasn't anyone I ever asked for advice or time that ever said no. If anything, they'd say to me, let's do lunch next month. And I think to myself, oh my gosh, crap, I got to come up with something to do about lunch. I didn't even know where to go, what to wear, what to ask. And literally these men and these women would say to me, okay, great, we should do this every month. I was panicked and I needed to put a plan together. And I put a plan together of what that would look like if I had 3 mentors. It was frightening how wonderful and kind these humans were. And they're out there. All of you have them out there waiting for you to be helpful to you. But you must ask. You must ask for what it is you want and you need. It will not come to you on a platter. You have to go for it and find it and fight for it and ask for help.
And to add to that, the power is in the follow through. So an executive may say, let's schedule lunch next month. The worst mistake you can make is not schedule lunch next month. And then the second worst mistake you can make is probably go to the lunch unprepared. And the third mistake is probably not follow up on the fact that you had lunch with them and schedule another time in the future. It's in your hands. It really is. And sometimes the, schedule, find a time on my calendar or follow up with me is more so a test to see if you're serious. As executives are hit up a lot for their advice. I'm lucky that I had Charlotte to introduce me to Hope and Sean. I'm lucky that I knew Jeff from a podcast, because if not, it would have been really difficult to get people on this panel as well with their high levels of expertise, credibility. Hope?
I want to respond to a question or a couple of questions in the chat. I want to ask the audience to think about, how do people experience you? So if you're working on your executive presence, how do people experience you? And you may have to ask a few people and get their unvarnished advice, but that's going to help you figure out how to frame, how directionally you want your executive presence to be, and what are the things you need to work on.
It's so tough to know how people experience you. Do you have any suggestions on how to get that info? Because you ask people sometimes and it's really tough to get them to give you the truth, because depending on how you respond to it. It may give you more of it or less of it.
Well, I think you have to ask a lot of people, and you may come away with some themes, and those themes are probably, pretty valid. And you have to spend some time thinking about how people experience you. You can kind of be a little more perceptive about that.
I would add one thing, and that's that asking for that feedback from people that you have trusted relationships with is important. And also telling them what your motivation is behind it. It's actually for self-development and growth. And give them permission to speak openly, authentically, even with the things that might be difficult to hear. And then prepare your heart before that conversation so that you're not going in with a defensive posture. You're really open. And then you can take that information to other people and either validate it or invalidate it. You don't have to agree with somebody with what they've shared with you, but the information can still be very helpful.
That's great, Jeff. Ben, there's a really good question, I thought, and maybe because it resonates with me. Any suggestions on how to be less direct in communication and still be efficient? And I think that it's very important to have plain speak, to be warm and authentic and a little bit softer than you might want to be, and don't come out swinging, and watch your tone like I'm doing now, which wouldn't be the tone to use when I'm asking a question. Soften your tone, soften your body. You can still be direct and clear without being direct that comes across as aggressive. And I think that's about tone and body language. I really do. I ask folks, and I'm extraordinarily direct. Hope and Sean do not say one word, nor you, Ben, but I'm extraordinarily direct, but I'm kind, and my heart is in the right place, and I would never do anything to hurt you. That's not the purpose of this. The purpose of this is for me to explain where I'm coming from or to ask you a question. So that is a delivery issue that all of us must be better at, because that's important as a leader, to show that you have active listening skills, that you are empathetic, and that you truly care about what they think and what their answer is. You're not coming up with the next thing you're going to say. You care what their answer is. So I don't think you can be an executive with presence and a leader if you're direct in such a way that you're off-putting to others. I wanted to tell you one other thing, Ben, that's hilarious, is someone just told me that because I mentioned the Amy Cuddy book, that the book is now out of stock at Amazon and is up twice as much as it cost before. So I apologize to all of you out there who are trying to buy Amy Cuddy's book. I didn't mean to put a run on it, but it's a great book, and I apologize for that.
And to add what Charlotte said, Charlotte, I think you're absolutely right. And about 10 years ago, when I was on Wall Street, this really senior banker told me to think about using words like perhaps and potentially, and in my humble opinion, when speaking to very senior folks or senior leaders or egotistical leaders. It'll just come off very differently. So, perhaps Charlotte is not as direct as she thinks she is, and she potentially is able to, communicate softly with some of her friends. So, but I use that every day now, Ben.
So I want to say thank you to all of you. This has been incredible. And there are 32 other questions that are sadly going to have to stay on the sidelines right now. And I'll try to respond to some through the follow-up. But there just isn't enough time for all of your expertise and your wisdom. But there is enough time for some last thoughts. So
Here's
Jeff,
my
would
last
you
thought.
like-
I think it makes sense to pay for some executive coaching. And I think Ben is a good example of an executive coach that you want to get some help. I think it's worth investing in yourself. I see it as professional development. It's so important to take care of yourself. So someone asked about that, and the answer is yes, it does work and it does make sense. And I think it's a great idea.
And then some final thoughts, Ben. A lot of folks have been asking about materials to kind of read at home. So, Charlotte, you mentioned the Daniel Coleman book. I think that's a great one. The Dale Carnegie is a classic, right? How to Win Friends and Influence People. Now there's a new version in the digital age. Those Harvard Business Review books, everyone, that you see at the airport in the racks that you don't make any sense, they're actually great. Harvard Business Review on, emotional intelligence, or on leadership, or management, or on strategy. They're actually great, quick reads. And then there's this really famous book called Bring a Dead Mouse by Charlotte Lee. So that one is still available. I checked. Definitely picked that one up. I bought many copies for my friends. And then, Ben, another thing that I always, you and I were talking earlier about what type of materials have influenced, my growth and success. And I'm always just trying to read biographies, especially of kind of great leaders in the industry. So in my industry specifically, Walt Disney or Murdoch or Iger or Eisner or Redstone or Jobs or Jay-Z or Phil Knight or whatever it is. And there's just so many good stories that they're telling, and you can learn from them. You can learn a lot from them.
I read a lot of biographies too. I feel the same way. You learn a lot from people's stories. I would, continue to look for role models. I think it's really a good way to help develop where it is you want to go. And with respect to Amy Cuddy, she has a great TED Talk. So you can go on YouTube and find her TED Talk.
I actually have a list of books I'll put in the chat. It's on my podcast website, a list of recommended books to read. They all will help you in your leadership and executive presence journey. So hopefully you'll find that helpful. I think grit and determination coupled with humility and self-awareness are going to give you the best chances for advancing in your executive presence, your quest to really bring executive presence. I'm also going to put my contact information in the chat. I'm happy to answer any questions offline since we ran out of time. So feel free to email me directly and I'll get back to you that way.
There have been so many resources mentioned, not to mention the resource of this video. And so all of this is going to be included in the follow-up email. So make sure you watch your inbox over the next day or so. It will include the links to these resources, as well as a link to the recording of this webinar. I already saw someone say they wanted to watch it again, and then another workshop on executive presence. But more importantly is I'm so grateful for all of you. And so I'd love to see in the chat box, just a big thank you to everyone that is here today, our panelists, Hope, Jeff, Sean, and Charlotte. Again, your wisdom is priceless, and I'm sure you've helped others develop executive presence and grow in their career, and ultimately, not only grow themselves, but grow their teams and the people that they're going to be leading, and hopefully create some impact in the world as well. So thank you all, and thank you to everyone that attended.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.